both of us.
Let me get it out.
Okay. I really tried. I was studying. I listened to podcasts. Oh my gosh, I listened to I'm going to talk about it. I listened to a really good one by Tim Keller.
Is
he
passed away.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he passed away last year.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But he's great. I love him.
It was,
I've read a lot of his marriage books for school. Because I ain't married.
Yeah.
If anyone
you want our deets, hit us at fullnessofjoythepodcast@gmail.com.
Yes. I love the Lord.
You must as well.
Yes.
That's what I always told. I told Jamie, because, the boys are going to marry the girls. I was like, they will love Jesus, they will have a good job, and they will have a reliable vehicle.
Yes. Unlike me. I love the Lord.
Yeah.
But I don't have a reliable vehicle.
That's why they have to, so you don't have to worry about it. And they'll know how to fix it.
That's true.
He'll come in and know how to fix it.
Yeah. One of my many standards, please be able to be a mechanic on my car. I do a lot of damage.
And or be willing to learn. Josh could always teach him. Josh could always
or Jonathan.
Class. Yeah.
That's true.
So just be willing to learn. Be open.
Yeah.
You got to grow.
Open-minded,
grow
please.
together.
Yeah.
All right. Let me find our intros here. They're somewhere in here. Okay. Here we go. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Welcome
to the Fullness of Joy podcast. I'm your host, Destiny.
And I'm your host, Mackenzie.
And on today's episode, we are going to be diving into Abram, also known as Abraham, just his story throughout Genesis and how he played a major role in what we can take and apply to our lives.
So grab a cup of coffee or your favorite tea and sit with us in the presence of God for this next half hour or so as we experience his fullness of joy. I thought you were playing footsies with me. It's my dog.
Yeah, I thought you were too, but it's your dog. Weird coincidence.
Daffy, are your feet that cold? Okay, so let's jump into Abraham. So yes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of notes because this guy.
I have the notes in my Bible.
Oh, and I'm jelly. That's how my old Bible used to look.
Oh, R.I.P.
R.I.P. to the Bible. A moment of silence. It's okay. It actually didn't burn, but the notes are just, like I said, where the water hit it. It just, you can't even read them. It's just like all pretty watercolor decor. But that's how my Bible used to look. And I used to have like construction paper or scrapbook paper that folded out and flaps with listen. If y'all don't know who Lisa Harper is, I want to include a picture here. And I want to, if I can find a picture of her and her Bible, my goal in life is to be Lisa Harper Bible sexy. Like her Bible looks so worn and torn and had like really, honestly, like yours, Des. You are on your way to Lisa Harper Bible sexy. And it just looks so worn and tattered. And I'm like, if her Bible's that messed up, that means her brain's that good.
Yeah. Well, we're opposite because I want to be like John Piper. I want to be like an old man on the pulpit, not really like preaching, but just like teaching God's word, like the meaty and the good stuff from it. And I just want to be an old man.
Oh,
I don't want to.
Now we did just put out.
Cut that out.
I was gonna say, we did just try to find you a fella. So.
Yeah, cut that out.
Okay.
I have an old man spirit, is what I should say.
Yeah, I want Lisa Harper. Yeah. Like she is so awesome. I love her. I just like her Bible.
Let's restart.
Yeah.
Let's take it. Yeah.
We took. That was a left turn and then a right turn and then another left turn back
and then like a turn
and then we went over a hill.
Tangent.
All right, Abraham. Yes. I have to leave that for YouTube at least. We'll cut it for Spotify.
Please. That'd be embarrassing.
Spotify is very eloquent. I cut out all the ums and the oops and the pauses. Spotify makes us sound very intellectual. YouTube. Whoopsie daisy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Abram. He's first mentioned in Genesis 11:26, which is just basically stating that he is the son of Terah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Terah lived 70 years and fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So that's basically, boom, the first mention of him is the genealogy. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then it starts out the next in chapter 12 of Genesis. Well, it also mentions in Genesis 11:31, Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, Haran's son, so that would have been like Abraham's nephew, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they set out together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan, but when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years and died in Haran. So then we start the next one in chapter 12, the call of Abram. So is there anything you want to?
I just want to say that Abram in Hebrew means father. But we also, in verse 32 in chapter 11, where it says Terah lived 205 years and he died in Haran. Terah in the Hebrew means delayed. And then Haran means barren.
Oh.
And so we get to see that same picture when it comes to the story of God's redemption story for Abraham and Sarah, of how it was a delayed pregnancy. She was barren for so long. And so it's just neat to know that, like, God's promise to Abram opens up a whole new movement in the story, because if we just go back to the Genesis, like through before chapter 12, we see the fall. First we see the divine creation. We get to see the fall, and then we get to see how ugly the world continued to be and broke the intimacy that we were supposed to have with God. And then Noah came. Gosh. Noah came and he built the ark, and him and his family were saved. And then we get the Tower of Babel, and then bam, it's a whole new movement, and God has a whole new purpose for these people, a whole new promise for his people, you know?
Yeah, I'll cut that "and" out. But if we look back, starting at Genesis 11:10, it's a whole genealogy from Shem to Abram. And I know a lot of times I will skip over genealogies because it gets boring. But I think it's important to know that if the genealogy in the Bible is shown, there's a reason for showing that genealogy. And some of those reasons are that genealogies show how God worked through history. They show how God used imperfect people, because you get to see, like, oh, wow, this person was mentioned here, but then here's their story and here's how God used them. It shows how God fulfills his promises. We see that through genealogies. And also they show us how to follow the royal and priestly bloodlines through Israel's history. So don't skimp over the genealogies. Like I said, it may get boring, but there really is purpose and importance to, like, if the genealogy's in there, there's a reason. So, like, try to read through it, because you may come back to something later and be like, oh, so that's why that was there. Yeah. So I just think that that's an important note.
Because we get to see where the messianic lineage begins, you know, or where the seed will be coming from.
We start in Genesis 12. So basically it starts with a command and a promise. And we see Abram still. Sorry. I'm probably going to mess it all up. Just know he starts as Abraham. Later he will change his name to Abraham, or he starts as Abram, later becomes Abraham. So if I say Abram or Abraham, or even I might just call him Abe, it's the same guy. So we see, again, he starts with a command and a promise. The Lord says to Abram, go from your land, your relatives, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt. And all the people on earth will be blessed through you. I kind of tried to break down his whole story, just in case there were little points that I wanted to kind of mention. And really the first point, other than this is where we see the promise begin, and that kind of, we will see that promise reaffirmed multiple times throughout his story. But kind of my first aha moment was verses 10 through 13. There was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to stay there for a while, because the famine in the land was severe. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, look, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. They will kill me, but let you live. Please say you're my sister, so it will go well for me because of you, and my life will be spared on your account. Okay, so that's my first are you kidding me moment. He goes into Egypt, and he just looks at his wife and says, hey, wife, you're really attractive and these dudes are probably going to kill me because of your beauty. So let's just say you're my sister, which means they're probably going to take you and do stuff with you, but I'll get to live that way. And I'm just like,
yeah. Well, let's look at Abraham's background.
Correct. Let's
give
us the background.
Was before God met him and called him to be the father of many nations, he was an idol worshiper. Like he worshipped pagans, and he had no idea who this Lord of the Hebrews were. He had no idea who Yahweh was until this promise, this covenant came into play. Throughout just the book of Genesis and throughout the life of Abram, we get to see how Abram is an example of growing in faith and complete obedience. Because Abraham's partial obedience, we get to see a lot of that, but the consequences that followed. Like when he took Lot with him, Lot caused a lot,
yes,
like he did.
Lot caused a lot of problems.
Yes, he did. But just seeing how just those little disobedient marks or those partial obedience or just that idol worship background that he had would cause for a lot of deception, and I think that's what he was trying to do here is Abram wanted to deceive because in reality it was a half-truth.
Yes.
Like get into like the genealogy or like the bloodline. It was so pure back then that like marriage of a half sister and half brother was okay. Because the bloodline was pure. And the further we get into the Old Testament or the Pentateuch or the Torah, we get to see how God turned around and starts to condemn that because of how bad sin can enter itself into something. It's like yeast entering into dough. Like just a little bit of yeast can go a long ways, and the same way is true with sin. But it's like the hinge. Like that's what chapter 12 is. It's the hinge. Like God's looking at a complete different movement and he's changing the momentum of his, like the momentum of his plan is beginning. Like that promised seed in Genesis 3 is like reiterated here. Did I say that right?
Yes, it's reiterated. You're on it, girlfriend. So basically, because of his half truth, the Lord struck Pharaoh and his household with severe plagues because of Abram's wife Sarai. We see that in verse 17. So then they are sent away. When Pharaoh says, "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? So that I took her as my wife. Now here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave the men orders about him, and they sent him away and his wife and all he had. So there's like a consequence of his half truth. Yeah,
it's true. But like I think like in the very beginning, just the discomfort him and Sarai had to face was the question of, do we want to live comfortable or do we want to live for God who's calling us to do this?
Right.
Because he became the father of missions, basically. I will make you into a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's a mission statement. That your family is going to take this message, this redemption story, and expand it to the Egyptians, to the Canaanites, to like wherever they were going. They were supposed to expand that to the
I never thought about
generations to come, because the land of Canaan was populated with tribes who were violent and very sinful, and that's where God was calling them to go. He was like, go to Canaan because I just called you and this is how these people are going to be blessed through you.
Oh, wow. See, I love your knowledge. I was telling my husband the other day, Josh, my husband, I was like, man, she knows stuff. And I appreciate it because, like I said, when I go back and edit these, I take notes. So I can remember stuff that you've said. Now we move into Genesis 13. We see Lot, which is Abe's, his nephew, right? Lot is his nephew, and they argue over this land, so they split up. And again, in verse 14, we see that promise reaffirmed, his promise to Abram, where he says, after Lot has separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, look, from the place you where you are, look north and south, east and west, for I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. And I just think that's important to note. We see that promise affirmed, but this is like later in time. The exact time, I don't know.
Charles Spurgeon said in one of his commentaries that the result of Abram's partial obedience was the absence of privilege. And so if we look at his lifestyle and the idol worship and the lack of privilege that he had, we get to see why he was so deceptive, but the Lord protected. Even though Abram was like, well, I'm just going to say that you're my sister because I don't want to die. But the Lord protected Sarah. He closed off her womb because he knew that, or the Lord didn't want Sarah's womb to be defiled.
Yeah.
Because it was the womb the Messiah was going to come through. Like whoever Sarah had, the Messiah was going to come through that son. Or
like when she was with Pharaoh?
Yeah.
Or the second time he gives her away, she doesn't, I don't remember if it says like
each time the Lord protected her.
Yeah.
And he protects.
Don't you feel like he was just like, Abram?
Yes, I really do.
Like, come on, man. A third time we see that promise reaffirmed in chapter 15, verse 4. Now the word of the Lord came to him. This one will not be your heir, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look at the sky and count the stars. If you are able to count them, then look at the sky and count all the stars. If you're able to count them, then he said to him, your offspring will be numerous. And it's just like God's continual confirmation of his promise to Abraham to make him into a great nation. And it's like in Ecclesiastes 3:11, it's showing that our timing is not God's timing. I think that's one like takeaway or application that we can have from this is like, okay, he gave Abram this promise way back when, but we see multiple times throughout the course of his life it reaffirmed, and yet it still hadn't come to fruition. But that's because God's timing is not our timing. Yeah. And I think that's very something that we can like glean from this and apply to our lives, and knowing that we may pray for something, we may ask for something, and God may grant it, but it may not be in the timing that we want or would desire. But like our timing is not God's timing.
Yeah, and I think the most beautiful thing about chapter 15 is that when he's sealing the deal with this covenant, that he has Abraham fall into a deep sleep, and he tells them about like how his people were going to be enslaved to Egypt for 430 years and mistreated and all these but they will get great possessions after. And then I'm just going to read it. Yeah. But in verse 17, or I'm going to read from 16. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On the day the Lord had made a covenant with Abraham and said to your descendants, I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Ephraimites, and then all the Enites, that God is sealing this covenant by putting it on him, on himself, on God, and not putting it on Abraham's shoulders. He is like, this covenant is mine alone. Like, you can mess up all you want because this is my covenant. Like, and I'm making this covenant for my sake, for the sake of who I am and how I deserve the glory and the honor, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And that it's just the smoking fire pot and the blazing torch appears.
Yeah, I had that as a wow moment.
Yes, it's like the Exodus 19 of that promise of a cloud in the day, fire by night.
Right.
The presence of the Lord will always be with you. And this is just reaffirming that the Lord's presence was with Abraham. And when he passed between those two pieces of that sacrificed animal, it sealed the covenant. And even though Abraham walked in first, God walked in last to show this is on my shoulders. Like this
taking
is
ownership. Like,
yeah, I made this, and I'm going to see it.
The fulfillment is me, not you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, and it's based on who God is, not who Abram is, because Abram again is living in half obedience until a certain point. When we we'll get there, but
yeah. Where were we? Genesis 13, we see about Lot, and then in Genesis 14, there's this 4 kings wage war against these 5 kings, and yeah, there's this war. The 4 kings win, and in that war, when they take Lot, right?
Yeah,
they take Lot. They take him. I don't remember.
Oh no, that was in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, okay. So what happened? Well, no, They also took Abraham's nephew Lot and his possessions, for he was living in Sodom, and they went on.
Oh wait, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that's Genesis 14. So then in 15. That's where the covenant, like we just talked about, happens.
I think, let's just take.
Oh yes, Abraham. Yeah, back in 14, Abraham does go in and he rescues Lot at night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
But let's just take a pause and think about the character or the attributes that we're seeing from Abram, because this is a character study.
Yes, absolutely.
And Abram is partial obedience, but here in chapter 14, we get to see that he's humble. You know, when the king of Sodom came before him and was with raised hand, I have sworn on oath to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you. This is Abraham speaking. Mm-hmm. Not even a thread of a strap of sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. Abram wanted no man to say that they made Abraham rich. He wanted all the glory to God alone. So imagine a half obedience man humbling himself, right, and saying, God made me this way. God made me rich, and I don't need any more than what God has given me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because that was a big. That would be a testimony to the king of Sodom.
Yeah,
because here he's offering these things, and Abram is saying no to it. I'm sure, if you were a person in that time and a king said, "Here," I'd be like, "Thank you." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But Abram, he's taking a stance there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people question that, and maybe that opened people's eyes for him saying that.
Yeah, and then we get to see the first honest prayer of, how am I going to be a man of great nations when you haven't given me a child yet? Mm-hmm. And it's that first honest prayer to God of, here I am being vulnerable and reflecting how I'm feeling to you, and how God, in our weakest moments or in our highest moments, he wants us to be vulnerable and transparent with him, even though he knows everything that's going on.
Right.
He's a father who wants to hear it from us, and I think
that's a concept a lot of people have a hard time with. It's well, if he knows everything, why do I have to say it? Mm-hmm. Well, as a mom, I know my kid went to school, but I want to hear all the details. I want to be like, how was your day? What did you do? How did you go to technology or library? You want that relationship and conversation. And that's what the Lord wants from us. Even though he knows it, it's that relationship, that connection that he offers us and desires from us.
Yeah.
So I think a really important point that we need to stop on, because this is a topic of so much conversation, is Genesis 15:6. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. So what is your input or take on this crediting it to him as righteousness?
It was God who did it. Abram, even if he was living in half obedience, didn't fully trust God yet, or had his faith his own yet, God was like, I'm going to credit it to you. I'm giving you this righteousness because this covenant, I'm bestowing this upon you. I'm bestowing this upon you for a reason. And so I'm crediting you as righteous, of just because he trusted, it says before, Abram believed the Lord, Abram trusted, and God credited him, in the same way that when we believe in him alone, he credits us as righteous, because it's the same way when we believe in God alone with a sincere heart, he credits us as righteous because of Jesus' sacrifice, and he credits Abraham as righteous because of the covenant he made with Abraham.
I found this little snippet from the NIV application commentary that I thought kind of explained it well. I guess that's how, it explains it a little bit. It said, Abraham simply believed, though he had no children and no hope of having any, God could make his offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky. Because Abram takes God at his word, God credits him with a legacy on the basis of the rightness of this faith. So he credits him on the basis of the rightness of this faith. Mm-hmm. He accomplished this by formally establishing the covenant with him. Recognized righteousness becomes the basis for the blessing. Mm-hmm. I thought that kind of summed it up nicely.
Yeah,
not my words. NIV application commentary.
Yeah, and I think that's also why the author of Hebrews in chapter 11 credits him as a man of faith.
Yes.
You know, even though, which I think is such an encouragement, even though, like, in my own life, I can see myself living in partial obedience, but God will credit me as faithful because I simply believed in him, you know?
So we are almost at 30 minutes. So we're going to kind of pause here and go into the next episode. It's going to be a continuation of Abraham, and we're also going to get into a little bit about Sarah or Sarai. But I think just kind of focusing on Abraham, some of the important things we can take away from him is that his faith in God, it gives credit to God's integrity. Like, it shows that. And also it shows, like, we can see Abraham's, it was partial obedience, but he continued to learn and to continue in that way. But he was still a human and he messed up. And boy, can we relate to that.
Yeah.
You know, just because he messed up doesn't mean he looked at his life and said, okay, you know what? I messed up. So I'm just going to go ahead and just do all the wrong things. Like, he was like, oh, I messed up. I'm still going to keep moving forward in trust and obedience and faith in God. And I feel like I have heard people talk to me before and be like, well, I messed up. Now what? Ask for forgiveness and keep going toward him. Learn. Like, now the next time you come to this, well, and like, look, even Abraham, came to the same situation again, still gives his wife away again as his sister. So he messed up double.
Yeah.
So, you know, even he didn't learn the first time or the second time. So when we come to those situations in our life where, you know, you mess up, you come up to that situation again, maybe you learned, maybe you didn't. Maybe you need to relearn the lesson. Like, just don't give up is, like, characteristic that we can take from Abraham.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we can take away from God and so early on in history is he's mission-minded. You know, like, in chapter 12 of Genesis, like, it's through you that these people are going to be blessed. And then in Isaiah, we get to see that Isaiah is talking and he's saying, because Israel didn't do this, God will be welcoming in a new nation, welcoming in new people. And then we also get to see it in Exodus, you know, in Exodus 12, of how a mixed multitude went with them during their exodus moment, you know, and how God is very mission-minded, that wherever he places you, he wants to use you to bless those through you, you know.
Absolutely. So before we move on, is there anything else we need to add to this little section? Because we're going to kind of pick up still here in Genesis 15 and kind of finish out Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah.
So I guess we will close out this episode. So that wraps up today's episode.
Join us next week as
we continue.
Yeah, as we continue about this.
Digging into Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah. We look forward to sharing with you as we begin this journey of proclaiming the good news of Christ by equipping, educating, and engaging you in your desire to better understand God and his word.
So until next time, remain in joy, and we will see you next week.
Bye!
I always have to lower the audio right there when I edit.